At the reading of the will, my sibling shouted, "This is fake." The lawyer's voice cut through the mahogany-paneled conference room like a blade. To my child, Morgan Elizabeth Hartwell, I leave my entire estate, including all properties, investments, and business holdings, valued at approximately $47 million. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat frozen in the leather chair, my hands gripping the armrest so hard my knuckles had gone white. Did he just say my name? Did he just say $47 million? What? The shriek came from across the table. My sister Jessica shot up from her chair so violently it toppled backward, crashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Portland. Her perfectly styled blonde hair whipped around her face as she whirled on the lawyer. "This is fake," she screamed, jabbing a manicured finger at the document spread across the conference table. "There's no way in hell Daddy left everything to her." Mr. Brennan, Dad's longtime attorney, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and cleared his throat. He'd been handling the Hartwell family legal affairs for over 20 years, and I could see in his weathered face that he'd been expecting this reaction. "Ms. Hartwell, I can assure you this will was executed properly on March 15th of this year, just 4 months ago. Your father was of sound mind and—" "Sound mind?" Jessica's voice cracked as it pitched higher. "He cut her off 5 years ago. 5 years. She hasn't spoken to him since she stormed out over the business. She didn't even come to his birthday last month." My stomach twisted. Actually, I had been there for his birthday. We'd spent 3 hours together at his favorite restaurant downtown, sharing stories and laughing like we hadn't in years. But Jessica didn't know that. Nobody knew that. "There has to be some mistake," Jessica continued, now pacing behind her chair like a caged animal in her designer black dress. "I'm the one who stayed. I'm the one who worked 60-hour weeks at Hartwell Industries. I'm the one who took care of him when he had pneumonia last winter. I earned this." She spun toward me, her blue eyes, so much like Dad's, blazing with fury. "You walked away from this family, Morgan. You chose your little non-profit job over us. You can't just waltz back in here after he's dead and take what's mine." I didn't. I started to speak for the first time since entering the room, but she cut me off. "Don't you dare say a word." Tears were streaming down her face now, leaving black mascara tracks on her cheeks. "Not one damn word. You probably manipulated him somehow. Got to him when he was sick or medicated or—" "Ms. Hartwell," Mr. Brennan interrupted firmly, "I must ask you to compose yourself. Your father's wishes were very clear, and this will underwent rigorous legal review. Everything is in perfect order." Jessica turned her fury back on him. "Then we'll contest it. I'll fight this with everything I have. No judge in the world will believe that Richard Hartwell left $47 million to the daughter who abandoned him." She grabbed her purse from the table, knocking over a glass of water in the process. "This isn't over, Morgan. Not by a long shot." The door slammed behind her with such force that the oil painting of some long-dead Hartwell ancestor rattled against the wall. And then there was silence again. I stared at the door Jessica had just slammed, my heart hammering against my ribs. The silence felt suffocating after her explosive outburst. Mr. Brennan methodically gathered the scattered papers, his movements deliberate and practiced. "She's going to fight this," I whispered, finding my voice at last. "Can she actually contest the will?" Mr. Brennan looked up from the documents, his expression carefully neutral. "She can try. Your sister has every legal right to challenge the will's validity. However," he paused, setting down his pen, "your father anticipated this possibility. He was very thorough in ensuring his final wishes would be protected." "What do you mean?" He reached into his briefcase and withdrew a thick manila envelope with my name written across it in Dad's familiar scrawl. "He left this for you specifically, with instructions that it only be given to you after the will was read and, well, after Ms. Jessica's reaction was observed." My hands trembled as I took the envelope. The weight of it surprised me. There was definitely more than just a letter inside. "There's something else you should know," Mr. Brennan continued, his voice gentler now. "Your father made several significant changes to his affairs in the months before his death. Beyond the will revision, he also established an irrevocable trust that holds approximately $12 million in additional assets. That trust names you as the sole beneficiary, and it cannot be contested regardless of what happens with the will. $12 million more." My head spun. "I don't understand. Why didn't you mention this earlier?" "Those assets were never part of his estate proper, they were transferred into the trust back in April. Your sister was unaware of the trust's existence." He cleared his throat. "Your father was very specific about the timing of these revelations." I thought about Jessica's face when she'd screamed about earning this inheritance, about her 60-hour work weeks at Hartwell Industries. The guilt that had been gnawing at me since hearing my name read aloud suddenly felt overwhelming. "Mr. Brennan, can I ask you something? Do you think I deserve this?" He studied me for a long moment before answering. "Ms. Hartwell, I've been practicing estate law for 34 years. I've seen families torn apart by money, and I've seen money used to heal old wounds. What I can tell you is that your father spent considerable time crafting these arrangements. This wasn't a decision he made lightly or in haste. But Jessica was right about some things. I did walk away from the family business. I did choose my work at the homeless shelter over Hartwell Industries. And yet," he said, sliding another document across the table, "your father tracked every article written about your nonprofit work. He kept newspaper clippings about the housing program you developed. He knew about the community garden project, the job training initiative, even the volunteer recognition award you received last Christmas." I stared at the paper. It was a photocopy of a Portland Tribune article featuring a picture of me at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for our new transitional housing facility. In the margin, someone had written in Dad's handwriting, "So proud of her vision, R.H." My throat tightened. He never told me he was following my work. "Richard was a complicated man," Mr. Brennan said quietly. "He deeply regretted many things about how he handled your relationship. The conversations we had about his estate planning were illuminating." I clutched the envelope tighter, feeling something hard and rectangular inside along with what seemed like multiple pages of paper. Outside the conference room windows, Portland's afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city Dad had built his empire in. Somewhere out there, Jessica was probably already calling her lawyer friends, ready to wage war over what she believed was rightfully hers. But first, I needed to read what Dad had left me in this envelope. I waited until I was alone in my cramped studio apartment before opening Dad's envelope. The familiar scent of his cologne, something expensive Jessica had given him last Christmas, still clung faintly to the paper. Inside were 3 items: a handwritten letter on his personal stationery, a small digital recorder, and what looked like a legal document stamped with dates from 6 months ago. My hands shook as I unfolded the letter first. My dearest Morgan. Asterisk, if you're reading this, then Brennan has done his job and you've witnessed Jessica's reaction. I'm sorry you had to endure that scene, but I needed you to see who she's become, who I helped create by giving her everything without teaching her the value of earning it. Asterisk. Asterisk, you chose compassion over profit. You chose to help people society had forgotten rather than add another zero to a bank account. I was too proud and too stubborn to tell you how much I admired that choice when it mattered. I'm telling you now. Asterisk. Asterisk, the recorder contains something you need to hear. Play it after you've read this completely. Asterisk. Asterisk, the document is a copy of the medical evaluation I underwent in February to establish my mental competency before changing the will. Dr. Petrosky examined me for 3 hours and declared me exceptionally lucid and mentally sharp. Jessica won't be able to claim I was diminished. Asterisk. But there's something else she doesn't know, something that will become relevant when she inevitably discovers our secret meetings. I paused reading, my heart rate spiking. What else had Dad planned? Asterisk, 2 weeks before I changed my will, I offered Jessica the chance to prove she deserved to inherit Hartwell Industries. I told her I was considering stepping down as CEO and wanted to see how she'd handle complete authority over our Portland housing development project, the low-income units the city mandated as part of our downtown expansion. Asterisk. Asterisk, I gave her a budget of $2.3 million and explicit instructions that these units were meant to house families transitioning out of homelessness. I told her your organization might be a valuable consulting partner, given your expertise with that population. Asterisk. Asterisk, Morgan, your sister spent 3 weeks actively trying to find loopholes to avoid building those units at all. When the city made it clear the housing was non-negotiable, she hired the cheapest contractors she could find and cut every corner possible. She told me, and I quote, "These people should be grateful for anything. They don't need granite countertops." Asterisk. The final straw came when she suggested we build the units in the basement level of the parking garage, technically fulfilling the housing requirement while keeping those types of people out of sight of our luxury tenants. Asterisk, Jessica had no idea I was documenting everything. She also had no idea that I'd already been meeting with you for 2 months by then, learning about your work, remembering who you really were beneath my disappointment. Asterisk. Asterisk, you once told me that how we treat society's most vulnerable reveals who we truly are. Your sister failed that test spectacularly. Asterisk. I set the letter down, my mind reeling. I remembered Jessica mentioning the housing project during one of our brief, awkward phone calls around Easter. She complained about bureaucratic red tape and unrealistic city requirements, but hadn't mentioned any of these details. With trembling fingers, I picked up the digital recorder and pressed play. Dad's voice filled my small apartment, strong and clear. March 10th, supplemental notes from my attorney. Jessica presented her final proposal today for the transitional housing units. She's requesting permission to install coin-operated laundry machines in the units and charge residents for hot water usage above 30 gallons per week. Her justification was that poor people need to learn financial responsibility. There was a long pause before he continued, his voice heavy with disappointment. She has no idea that her sister's organization houses over 200 families a year with more dignity and compassion than Jessica would show to a dozen. The contrast couldn't be clearer. I know what I have to do. The recording clicked off, leaving me sitting in stunned silence as Portland's evening light faded outside my window. Jessica wasn't just going to contest the will. When she found out about our reconciliation, she was going to claim I'd manipulated Dad by badmouthing her work. She had no idea he'd been testing her all along. I spent the entire night reading through the rest of Dad's envelope. There were photocopies of Jessica's emails to contractors, screenshots of text messages where she complained about wasting money on losers, and a particularly damning recording from February 8th where she told Dad's assistant that the transitional housing residents should be grateful we're not just putting them in shipping containers. But the document that made my blood run cold was buried at the very bottom, a private investigator's report dated January 15th. Dad had hired someone to look into Jessica's personal finances. According to the PI, my sister had been skimming money from Hartwell Industries for over 2 years. Nothing huge, $5,000 here, $8,000 there, but always from accounts tied to the company's charitable giving. The Hartwell Foundation Scholarship Fund was short $18,000. The annual donation to Portland Children's Hospital was missing $12,000. Even the company Christmas party fund for employees had been raided for $6,000. The investigator estimated Jessica had stolen nearly $73,000 total, all carefully disguised as administrative costs and processing fees that she'd paid to a consulting company called Meridian Solutions LLC. A consulting company that, according to the Oregon Secretary of State's Business Registry, was owned entirely by Jessica Marie Hartwell. I stared at the papers spread across my kitchen table until my vision blurred. My sister, who'd screamed about earning her inheritance, who'd worked those 60-hour weeks, who'd positioned herself as the responsible one, had been systematically stealing from Dad's company while I was building housing for homeless families. My phone rang at 6:47 a.m., jolting me from the couch where I'd fallen asleep surrounded by documents. Morgan. It was my cousin David, Jessica's age but infinitely more level-headed. Have you seen the news? What news? Check Channel 8. Jessica called a press conference. I fumbled for my laptop and pulled up the local news website. The headline made my stomach drop. Hartwell Industries heiress claims sister manipulated dying father for fortune. The video showed Jessica standing outside the downtown offices of Dad's company, wearing a black suit and flanked by 2 men in expensive suits I didn't recognize. Her eyes were red-rimmed but her voice was steady as she spoke into a cluster of microphones. My father Richard Hartwell was a brilliant businessman, but in his final months he became vulnerable to manipulation, she said, looking directly into the cameras. My sister Morgan abandoned our family 5 years ago, rejecting everything our father built. She had no contact with him until he became ill, and then she suddenly reappeared with stories designed to turn him against me. One of the reporters shouted a question I couldn't make out, but Jessica's response was crystal clear. I have reason to believe Morgan convinced our father that I was somehow unfit to inherit, possibly by lying about my work performance or my dedication to the company. The timing of these will changes, coinciding exactly with her sudden return to his life, is extremely suspicious. She paused, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I'm not just fighting for my inheritance. I'm fighting for my father's true legacy and the company that bears our family name. Hartwell Industries employs over 800 people in Portland. My sister has never shown any interest in business, and frankly, I don't believe she's capable of managing assets of this magnitude responsibly. The lawyer standing to her left stepped forward. We'll be filing a formal contest of the will within the week, citing undue influence and possible fraud. We're also requesting a full forensic audit of any communications between the deceased and Ms. Morgan Hartwell during the relevant time period. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands shaking with rage. Jessica was painting herself as the victim and me as a manipulative opportunist. She had no idea that her own documented cruelty and theft had driven Dad's decision. But now I faced an impossible choice: let her destroy my reputation publicly, or reveal the evidence that would destroy her life completely. My phone started ringing non-stop after Jessica's press conference aired. First it was reporters, somehow they'd gotten my number within hours. Then it was old college friends who'd seen the news, calling with awkward condolences mixed with barely concealed curiosity about the inheritance drama. I let them all go to voicemail. By noon, I'd counted 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. But the one that made me actually answer was from Marcus Webb, the director of Portland Community Housing, my boss for the past 4 years. Morgan, we need to talk. His voice was tight with concern. Can you come in? Not to work, just to talk. 30 minutes later, I sat across from Marcus in his cluttered office, surrounded by filing cabinets stuffed with case files and grant applications. The man who'd hired me fresh out of graduate school and supported every crazy housing initiative I proposed now looked deeply uncomfortable. The board got 3 calls this morning, he said without preamble. Donors asking questions about your family situation and whether it affects your commitment to the organization. My stomach sank. Marcus. Let me finish. He held up a weathered hand. Mrs. Chen from the Riverside Foundation wants to know if you'll still be running our transitional housing program now that you're, well, wealthy. And honestly, Morgan, I need to know too. Are you planning to leave us? The question hit me like a physical blow. Portland Community Housing had been my life for 4 years. The transitional housing program I'd built from scratch now served 60 families annually. The job training partnerships, the community gardens, the children's after-school program, they were my legacy, my purpose. I never even considered leaving, I said quietly. This inheritance doesn't change who I am or what matters to me. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying my face. I believe you. But Morgan, there's something else. Channel 8 called an hour ago wanting a statement about your sister's allegations. They specifically asked about any connection between Hartwell Industries and our organization. My blood turned to ice. What kind of connection? I told them we'd never received funding from Hartwell Industries, which is true. But then I started thinking. He pulled out a file folder. That anonymous donation we received in March, $50,000 for the Emergency Housing Fund. It came through Brennan and Associates. Dad's law firm. You think my father donated to us? I think your father might have been researching our work for months before he changed his will, Marcus said carefully. And if Jessica's legal team finds out about that donation, it's going to look very bad for you. Like maybe your reconciliation with him wasn't as innocent as it seemed. I thought about the March 15th date on Dad's will, the same month he'd apparently donated to my organization. Jessica's lawyers would paint it as proof of manipulation, evidence that I'd used my nonprofit work to guilt Dad into changing his inheritance. There's more, Marcus continued reluctantly. I made some calls after the board meeting. 3 other organizations that work with homeless populations got similar anonymous donations in February and March, all routed through Brennan and Associates. Total of about $200,000. $200,000. Dad had been systematically funding homeless services across Portland while Jessica was trying to cut corners on transitional housing and stealing from charity accounts. Marcus, I swear I had no idea about any donations. I never asked my father for money. I know you didn't. But here's what I'm worried about. Jessica's press conference made it sound like you suddenly appeared in your father's life after years of estrangement. If she can prove he was already funding your work before you two reconciled, it's going to support her manipulation claims. My phone buzzed with another call from an unknown number. I declined it, but Marcus's expression grew grimmer. There's one more thing. After I started digging into those donations, I found something troubling. Someone's been asking questions about our funding sources, calling our partner organizations, requesting information about our board composition and operational procedures. What kind of someone? Private investigators, Morgan. Jessica's team is already building their case, and they're being very thorough. Outside Marcus's office window, I could see the community garden where dozens of families grew vegetables each summer, one of the programs I'd fought hardest to establish. Now everything I'd built was about to become collateral damage in Jessica's war. And the evidence that could destroy her case against me was sitting in my apartment, waiting for me to decide whether to use it. That evening, I sat in my apartment staring at Dad's evidence against Jessica, when my phone rang with a number I recognized, David, my cousin. Morgan, you need to know what's happening, his voice was urgent. Jessica's losing it. She showed up at Uncle Richard's house an hour ago with a locksmith. She what? She's trying to get into his safe. Claims she has a right to secure important documents before you can destroy them. The neighbors called the police, but since she still has keys to the house. I closed my eyes. Of course Jessica would try something like this. Did she get into the safe? That's the thing, she couldn't. Apparently your dad changed the combination recently. But Morgan, she was screaming at the cops about how you probably already cleaned out anything valuable. She's telling everyone who'll listen that you've been planning this for months. After David hung up, I called Mr. Brennan's emergency line. He answered on the second ring, sounding tired. Ms. Hartwell, I was expecting your call. I assume you've heard about your sister's activities this evening. Is she going to be arrested? No charges were filed. Technically, as your father's executor, I still control access to the house, but Jessica does have some legal standing as a beneficiary until the will is probated. However, he paused. There's something you should know. She didn't just try to open the safe. She also removed several boxes of documents from your father's study. My stomach dropped. What kind of documents? Business files, personal correspondence, financial records. Items that could be relevant to a will contest. I filed an emergency motion with the court to have them returned, but it will take several days. Mr. Brennan, what if she finds something that makes me look bad? What if there are records of Dad's donations to homeless organizations that make it seem like I was manipulating him? There was a long silence before he answered. Miss Hartwell, are you familiar with the concept of mutually assured destruction? The phrase sent a chill down my spine. You mean the Cold War strategy? Your sister is playing a very dangerous game. She's banking on the assumption that you won't fight back, that you'll be too guilty or too overwhelmed to defend yourself properly. But what she doesn't realize is that your father left you with enough ammunition to end this war decisively. I looked at the private investigator's report detailing Jessica's theft, still spread across my kitchen table. You think I should release the evidence about her stealing from the company? I think you should consider all your options carefully. Your sister has made this public with her press conference. She's questioning your character and your motives in front of the entire city. The question is, how far are you willing to let her go before you respond? After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and tried to think clearly. Jessica had stolen over $70,000 from charity funds. She tried to house homeless families in a parking garage basement. She'd called vulnerable people losers and suggested they should be grateful for shipping containers. But she was still my sister. And exposing her crimes wouldn't just humiliate her, it would destroy her completely. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email. You need to see this. A friend. The email contained a link to Jessica's personal Facebook page. Someone had screenshotted her posts before she'd made them private, including one from March 20th, 5 days after Dad signed his new will. Finally convinced Daddy to let me handle the low-income housing project solo, she'd written. Time to show these bleeding hearts how business really works. Some people think poor folks deserve luxury apartments. Face with rolling eyes, we'll see about that. The post had received 43 likes and 12 comments, including one from her best friend Sarah. Girl, you're gonna save the company so much money. Your dad will be so proud. Jessica had been bragging on social media about screwing over homeless families. And now I had proof that her attitude toward Dad's charitable priorities went far beyond simple business disagreements. The next morning brought a knock on my door at 7 a.m. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in a navy business suit holding an official-looking envelope. Morgan Hartwell. I'm Susan Chen from Brennan & Associates. I have an urgent message from Mr. Brennan. I opened the door cautiously. Couldn't he just call? There's been a development that requires immediate attention, she said, handing me the envelope. Mr. Brennan is in court filing emergency motions, but he wanted you to have this information before Jessica's team contacts you. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet with a timeline. Tuesday 6 p.m., Jessica removed 14 boxes of documents from your father's study. Tuesday 11:30 p.m., private investigator observed Jessica's car at Hartwell Industries office building. Wednesday 2:15 a.m., building security logs show Jessica's keycard accessing executive floors. Wednesday 6 a.m., Jessica's attorney requested expedited court hearing for Friday. She spent the night at Dad's company? I asked. Susan nodded grimly. Security footage shows her leaving at 4:47 a.m. with additional boxes. Mr. Brennan believes she's found something she thinks will destroy your case. My phone rang before I could respond. The caller ID showed Jessica's number. Hello, Morgan. Her voice was different now, cold and controlled, nothing like the screaming woman from the lawyer's office. I think we need to talk. Jessica, what are you doing? I'm protecting our family's legacy. Did you really think Daddy didn't keep records of everything? Every phone call, every meeting, every little conversation you two had during your secret reconciliation. My blood turned to ice. What are you talking about? March 8th, Riverside Cafe, table 14. You told him I called homeless people human garbage during the housing project meeting. Ring a bell? I had never said that. Ever. Jessica, I never. March 22nd, his study, 7:30 p.m. You showed him photographs of the substandard conditions I allegedly wanted to create for the transitional housing. Except those photos were from a condemned building downtown, weren't they, Morgan? That's insane. I never showed him any photographs. Jessica's laugh was sharp. Dad documented everything, sister dear. Times, dates, direct quotes. He wrote down every poisonous thing you fed him about me. The only problem is... She paused dramatically. Some of these conversations supposedly happened on days when I can prove you were working at the homeless shelter, logged in at 9 a.m. and not leaving until 6 p.m. My mind raced. None of this made sense. Jessica, I don't know what documents you found, but... Oh, I know exactly what I found. Daddy's private journal, where he wrote down all your lies. The same lies that convinced him to change his will. Except you got sloppy with your timeline, Morgan. You claimed I said things during meetings that happened when you were documentably somewhere else. I never lied to him about anything. February 15th journal entry, Morgan told me Jessica called the homeless families parasites and said they deserved to live in squalor. But guess what? February 15th was a Tuesday, and you were running that all-day workshop for new volunteers. I have the sign-in sheets from your own organization proving it. My heart was pounding now. Someone had lied to Dad about what Jessica said, but it wasn't me. Jessica, someone's setting us both up. I never had any conversation with Dad on February 15th. Right. Because you're going to claim someone else was lying to him. Who, Morgan? Who else would have access to detailed information about my work on the housing project? Who else would know exactly what to say to turn him against me? I don't know, but... Here's what's going to happen. Jessica's voice turned ice cold. You're going to renounce the inheritance. All of it. You're going to make a public statement admitting you manipulated a sick, elderly man with fabricated stories about his other daughter. And if you don't, what? These journal entries are going to the Portland Tribune tomorrow morning, along with documentation proving you couldn't have been present for half the conversations you allegedly had with Dad. Your little nonprofit is going to be exposed as a front for elder abuse, and every family you claim to help will know their advocate is actually a lying, manipulative fraud. The line went dead. I sat staring at my phone, my mind spinning. Someone had been feeding Dad lies about Jessica, using information detailed enough to be convincing but sloppy enough to be disprovable. Someone with access to both Jessica's work and my schedule. Someone who wanted us to destroy each other. And now Jessica was about to expose what looked like an elaborate fraud scheme, with me as the prime suspect. I called Mr. Brennan immediately after Jessica hung up, but it went straight to voicemail. Susan Chen had left her card, so I tried her number, also voicemail. At 8:30 a.m. on a Wednesday, everyone who could help me was apparently already in court dealing with Jessica's emergency motions. I paced my apartment, trying to piece together what Jessica had found. Dad's journal with fabricated conversations, all carefully timestamped to make me look like a liar. But who else had access to detailed information about both Jessica's housing project and my work schedule? My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, emergency board meeting at 10 a.m. 3 major donors pulling funding. We need to talk now. 20 minutes later, I sat in Portland Community Housing's conference room facing 5 grim board members. Mrs. Patterson, our biggest individual donor, didn't even wait for Marcus to start the meeting. Morgan, dear, we've received some very disturbing information about your family situation, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Someone sent us copies of what appear to be your father's private journals, documenting conversations where you allegedly made false claims about your sister. My stomach plummeted. Someone sent you Dad's journals. Who? Marcus slid a manila envelope across the table. They arrived by courier at 7 a.m. No return address, but the delivery receipt shows they were sent from a downtown law office. Inside were photocopied pages of Dad's distinctive handwriting. Asterisk March 8th, Morgan visited today. Very upset about Jessica's handling of transitional housing. Claims Jay called homeless families human garbage and a waste of city resources during contractor meeting. Need to investigate further, asterisk. Asterisk March 15th, Morgan provided photos of substandard housing conditions Jessica approved for project. Conditions appear deliberately inadequate, exposed wiring, black mold, no proper ventilation. Heartbreaking, asterisk. Asterisk March 22nd, M says Jessica laughed about putting those people in basement units. Quote, they should be grateful we're not making them live in shipping containers. Cannot believe my daughter capable of such cruelty, asterisk. The handwriting looked perfect. The dates matched Jessica's timeline. And according to the timestamps, I'd supposedly had these conversations on days when I was provably elsewhere. Morgan, Mrs. Patterson continued, if these documents are authentic, they suggest you engaged in a systematic campaign to deceive your dying father. Several board members feel we cannot continue our association with someone who. The documents are fake, I said firmly. Or at least, the conversations attributed to me are fake. I never said any of those things to my father. Board member David Kim leaned forward. But you did reconcile with your father before his death. You did have regular contact with him. Yes, but. And you're claiming someone else fed him these specific lies about your sister? Who would have access to such detailed information about internal Hartwell Industries meetings? That was the question I couldn't answer. Jessica was right, who else would know the intimate details of her housing project work? Who else would have known my exact schedule well enough to fabricate conversations on days I was documentably busy? Marcus cleared his throat. Morgan, there's something else. We received a call from Channel 8 an hour ago. They're running a story tonight about these journal entries. They specifically asked about the anonymous donations your father made to homeless organizations and whether you knew about them during your reconciliation. I had no idea about any donations. That's what we told them, Mrs. Patterson said coldly, but frankly, it's becoming difficult to believe anything about this situation. The timing is just too convenient. Your father starts secretly funding your area of work, then changes his will to leave you everything after you allegedly poison him against your sister with fabricated stories. She stood up, gathering her purse. I'm sorry, Morgan, but the Patterson Foundation is suspending all funding to this organization pending a full investigation. I suggest you take a leave of absence until this matter is resolved. 2 other board members nodded agreement. Within 10 minutes, I'd lost 3 major donors and been effectively forced out of my job. As the board members filed out, Marcus remained behind, looking deeply uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Morgan. I believe you, but the board controls the money. Without funding, I can't protect your position. Marcus, someone's orchestrating this whole thing. The journal entries, the timing, even having those documents delivered to our board this morning, it's too coordinated to be Jessica working alone. Then who? Before I could answer, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Brennan and Associates. Ms. Hartwell, this is critical, Mr. Brennan's voice was tight with urgency. Do not speak to any reporters today. Jessica's legal team has filed a criminal complaint with the Portland police alleging elder abuse and fraud. There's a warrant being issued for your arrest. My legs nearly gave out. Arrest? For what? Fraudulent misrepresentation, undue influence, and potentially theft by deception. The journal entries she found provide evidence of systematic deception, and the anonymous donations to homeless organizations look like money laundering to benefit you indirectly. But the conversations in those journals never happened. I can prove I wasn't even. I know. But here's the problem, we just discovered your father's home security system was disabled on every single date when you supposedly visited him. Someone with technical knowledge made sure there would be no video evidence to contradict the journal entries. The room started spinning. Someone had planned this frame up months in advance, disabling security cameras and creating fake journal entries with impossible timelines. They wanted Jessica and me to destroy each other, but when that wasn't happening fast enough, they decided to destroy me completely. Mr. Brennan, I think someone else wants control of Hartwell Industries. Someone who needed both Jessica and me out of the picture. That's exactly what I'm afraid of, he said grimly. And whoever it is just convinced the police you're a criminal. I hung up with Mr. Brennan and immediately called the one person who might have answers, David, my cousin. He'd been working at Hartwell Industries for 3 years in their IT department, handling security systems and digital infrastructure. David, I need to ask you something important, I said when he answered. Who has access to Dad's home security system? Why? His voice was cautious. Morgan, Jessica's been telling everyone you're about to be arrested. Because someone disabled the cameras on specific dates to cover their tracks. Someone with technical knowledge who knew exactly when to create blind spots. There was a long pause. Morgan, the security system wasn't disabled. I checked the logs this morning after hearing about the journal entries. Every camera was functioning normally during February and March. My heart stopped. What do you mean? I mean there should be footage of everyone who visited Uncle Richard during those months. But here's the weird thing, Jessica requested access to the security archives 2 weeks ago, claiming she needed them for the will contest. I gave her the login credentials because she's family and, well, I thought she had every right. She had access to the footage. Complete access. She could view anything, download anything, or... His voice trailed off as the implication hit him. Oh shit, Morgan. She could delete anything too. The pieces clicked together in my mind. Jessica hadn't found evidence that I'd lied to Dad, she destroyed evidence that someone else had been visiting him. Someone whose presence would explain the fake journal entries and reveal the real manipulator. David, can you check if any footage was deleted? I can try, but Jessica's not the only one who's been accessing the system. There were 3 other user logins during the past month, all from someone with administrative privileges. Who else has admin access? Just family members and... He paused, typing. And senior company executives. Morgan, according to these logs, someone accessed the security system from Hartwell Industries' main office at 2:30 a.m. last Tuesday night, the same night Jessica was there going through files. Was it Jessica's login? No, that's what's strange. It was a completely different administrative account. Someone else was in that building with her, and they accessed Dad's home security system while she was digging through his business records. I felt the blood drain from my face. David, who else has administrative access to both the company systems and Dad's home security? Only 3 people, Jessica, you, and... His voice became very quiet. And James Morrison, Dad's CFO. He's had access to everything for 15 years, including all the financial systems where someone's been routing those anonymous donations. James Morrison. Dad's most trusted employee, the man who'd been positioning himself as the logical interim CEO while Jessica and I fought over the inheritance. The man who would benefit most if both of Dad's children were deemed unfit to control Hartwell Industries. David, I think James has been playing us against each other from the beginning. He fed Dad lies about Jessica to turn him against her, but he made sure the timeline was provably false so he could later frame me for manipulation. But why? James makes good money as CFO. Because if both Jessica and I are disqualified, her for theft, me for elder abuse, who do you think the board would choose to run the company? The longtime CFO who's been loyally holding everything together during the family crisis. My phone beeped with another call. James Morrison's name appeared on the screen. Morgan. His voice was smooth, concerned. I just heard about the police situation. This is terrible, such a misunderstanding. I'm sure we can clear this up quickly. I bet you are, I said coldly. Listen, I know you're upset, but fighting isn't going to help anyone. Why don't you come to the office? We can discuss how to handle this delicately, maybe find a way to satisfy Jessica's concerns while protecting your reputation. You mean find a way to make me confess to crimes I didn't commit? There was a brief pause. Morgan, you sound paranoid. The stress of this situation is clearly affecting your judgment. Let me help you. The way you helped my father. By feeding him lies about Jessica while simultaneously setting me up to take the blame. The line went quiet for several long seconds. When James spoke again, his voice had lost all pretense of concern. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. But unfortunately, you're also too late. The police will be at your apartment within the hour, and Jessica's already signed a statement confirming the journal entries match conversations your father described to her. Even if you figure out what really happened, who's going to believe you? The call ended, leaving me staring at my phone in my empty apartment, knowing that in less than 60 minutes, I'd be under arrest for crimes orchestrated by the man who was about to steal my father's company. But James Morrison had made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated what my father had left me to fight back with. I raced back to my apartment, knowing I had maybe 30 minutes before the police arrived. My hands shook as I spread Dad's evidence across my kitchen table, the private investigator's report on Jessica's theft, the recordings of her callous comments about homeless families, and most importantly, the financial records showing James Morrison's access to every account Jessica had been skimming from. But as I studied the documents more carefully, a new pattern emerged that made my blood run cold. The dates on Jessica's fraudulent transactions didn't just show her stealing from charity funds, they showed systematic approval from James Morrison's administrative account. Every single theft had been electronically authorized by the CFO, despite company policy requiring board approval for charitable fund transfers over $5,000. James hadn't just been covering up Jessica's crimes. He'd been enabling them, creating a paper trail that would destroy her credibility while positioning himself as the innocent executive who'd discovered the fraud after my father's death. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email. You need this. D. David had sent me a zip file containing security footage from Hartwell Industries' parking garage. The timestamp showed March 7th, 11:30 p.m., one day before the first fake journal entry claiming I'd lied to Dad about Jessica. The grainy video showed James Morrison's Mercedes pulling up next to Dad's BMW in the executive parking section. Both men got out, but instead of going into the building, they stood beside their cars talking for nearly 20 minutes. Even without audio, Dad's body language was clearly agitated, pointing, shaking his head, stepping away when James moved closer. At 11:47 p.m., James handed Dad what looked like a manila folder. Dad opened it, read for several minutes, then threw the papers back at James before storming to his car and driving away. The next day's journal entry claimed I'd told Dad that Jessica called homeless people human garbage. But the real revelation was in the second video file. March 15th, 2:15 a.m., the night Dad signed his new will. Security footage showed James's car in the Hartwell Industries parking lot, and the metadata David had included proved someone had accessed Dad's home security system from the office at exactly 2:18 a.m. James had been watching Dad's house remotely, making sure no one witnessed whatever had happened during those crucial final conversations. My laptop chimed with another email, this one from an address I recognized, Dad's personal account, sent automatically through a delayed delivery system. Morgan. Asterisk if you're reading this, then James Morrison has made his move and you're in serious trouble. I programmed this email to send automatically 7 days after my death, but only if specific financial triggers were activated in the company accounts, asterisk. James has been stealing from Hartwell Industries for over a decade, but he's been clever about it, routing funds through shell companies, creating fake consulting fees, even manipulating Jessica's charity account access to make her look guilty of his crimes. Asterisk 3 weeks before I died, he approached me with a proposal, fire Jessica for incompetence, name him as my successor, and restructure my will to leave you a modest trust while giving the company to professional management. When I refused, he became desperate, asterisk. Asterisk the journal entries were his insurance policy. He's been documenting fake conversations for months, planning to frame you for elder manipulation if I didn't cooperate. But he made one critical error, he never realized I was recording every conversation we had, asterisk. I frantically clicked on the email attachment. It was an audio file dated March 15th, timestamped 8:30 p.m., just hours before Dad signed his final will. James Morrison's voice filled my apartment, smooth and persuasive. Richard, you're making a mistake. Morgan has been feeding you lies about Jessica to position herself for the inheritance. Those stories about Jessica wanting to put homeless families in shipping containers. Pure manipulation designed to make you doubt your own daughter. Dad's response was firm, James, I have documentation of everything Jessica said. Security footage, recorded meetings, her own emails. Morgan didn't tell me anything I hadn't already discovered myself. But the timing, Richard. She disappears for 5 years, then suddenly returns right when you're most vulnerable. The timing was my choice, Dad interrupted. I reached out to Morgan because I finally understood what kind of person my other daughter had become. And frankly, I'm beginning to question your judgment in defending Jessica's behavior. There was a long pause before James spoke again, his voice colder now. I think you're making decisions based on emotion rather than logic. Perhaps you should consider whether you're mentally capable of managing these complex family dynamics. Are you questioning my competency, James? I'm questioning whether a man who's been manipulated by one daughter into disinheriting the other is thinking clearly about his legacy. The recording ended there, but the implication was crystal clear. James had threatened Dad's mental competency to try forcing his cooperation, not knowing that Dad was documenting everything. Car doors slammed outside my building. Through my window, I could see 2 police officers walking toward the entrance, along with a woman in a business suit who was probably a detective. I had maybe 2 minutes before they knocked on my door, but now I finally had the evidence to prove James Morrison had orchestrated everything, the fake journal entries, the deleted security footage, Jessica's financial crimes, and the systematic manipulation that had torn my family apart. The question was whether anyone would believe me before James destroyed the remaining evidence and disappeared with control of my father's company. The knock came exactly 90 seconds later, 3 sharp raps that made my heart jump into my throat. I quickly saved Dad's audio file to a cloud drive and shoved the most crucial documents into my laptop bag. Morgan Hartwell. Portland Police. We need to speak with you. I opened the door to find Detective Sarah Martinez and Officer Chen standing in my hallway, their expressions professionally neutral but not unkind. Behind them lurked a thin man in an expensive gray suit who I didn't recognize. Ms. Hartwell, I'm Detective Martinez. We have some questions regarding allegations of elder abuse and financial fraud. You're not under arrest, but we'd like you to come to the station voluntarily for an interview. The thin man stepped forward. I'm Robert Kessler, representing the complainant in this matter. Ms. Hartwell, my client has provided substantial evidence of your systematic deception of your deceased father, including documented lies about your sister that influenced his final will. Your client being James Morrison? I asked. Kessler's eyebrows rose slightly. My client is Jessica Hartwell, who discovered evidence of your manipulation in your father's private papers. Mr. Morrison is simply a concerned employee trying to protect the company during this family crisis. Of course. James was smart enough to let Jessica be the public face of the accusations while he pulled strings from behind the scenes. Detective Martinez consulted her notepad. Ms. Hartwell, we have documentation showing you had multiple meetings with your father in February and March, during which you allegedly made false claims about your sister's professional conduct. Can you tell us about those meetings? I can do better than that, I said, slinging my laptop bag over my shoulder. I can prove that someone else has been manipulating this entire situation, including fabricating evidence to frame me. Officer Chen exchanged a glance with his partner. Ma'am, if you have evidence of fraud, we'd be very interested to see it. 20 minutes later, I sat in interview room B at Portland Police Central Precinct, my laptop open on the scarred metal table. Detective Martinez had been surprisingly receptive to hearing my side, especially after I played Dad's recording of James threatening his mental competency. Let me make sure I understand this, she said, taking notes. You're claiming that James Morrison, the CFO of Hartwell Industries, has been embezzling company funds and manipulating both you and your sister to gain control of the business. Not just claiming. Proving. I pulled up the financial records Dad had left me. Look at these transaction logs. Every time Jessica transferred money from charity accounts, the transfers were pre-authorized by James Morrison's administrative account. Company policy requires board approval for charitable fund transfers over $5,000, but James was electronically approving them himself. Detective Martinez studied the screen. This shows a pattern of authorization, but how do we know Morrison wasn't just rubber stamping requests from Jessica? I clicked to another file. Because the private investigator my father hired tracked the money. Jessica's fake consulting company, Meridian Solutions, never received any of the stolen funds. They were routed through 3 shell companies, all registered to a business address that James Morrison has used for his personal real estate investments. So Morrison was stealing money and making it look like Jessica was responsible. Exactly. And when my father started getting suspicious, James fed him fake information about Jessica to turn them against each other. But he made the timeline deliberately disprovable so he could later claim I was manipulating Dad with lies. Officer Chen looked up from his own notepad. Miss Hartwell, this is a very serious accusation. Do you have any concrete evidence that Morrison created false documentation? I pulled up David's security footage. This video shows James giving my father documents on March 7th, the night before the first fake journal entry claiming I lied about Jessica. Watch my father's reaction when he reads whatever James handed him. The grainy parking garage footage played on my laptop screen. Even Detective Martinez winced at Dad's obvious anger as he threw the papers back at James. The next day's journal entry quotes me saying Jessica called homeless people human garbage, I continued. But I was running an all-day workshop that day, with 30 witnesses and sign-in sheets proving I never left the community center. Detective Martinez was quiet for a long moment, studying her notes. Ms. Hartwell, if what you're telling us is true, then we're looking at a conspiracy involving embezzlement, fraud, and possibly forgery. But I have to ask, why should we believe your version over your sister's? She's the one who brought us the journal evidence. Because, I said, pulling up the final piece of Dad's puzzle, my father recorded his last conversation with James Morrison. The night before he died, James made one final threat that proves he was orchestrating everything. I hit play on the audio file dated March 22nd, Dad's voice, weak but determined, James, I know what you've been doing. The shell companies, the manipulated financial records, even the fake stories about Jessica. I've documented everything. James's response was ice cold, Richard, you're a sick old man who's been manipulated by a daughter who abandoned you for 5 years. If you try to expose me, I'll make sure the world knows Morgan Hartwell is an elder-abusing fraud who destroyed her own family for money. Choose wisely. Dad's final words on the recording made my throat tight, I already have chosen. My will is signed, and my real daughter will inherit everything she deserves. You'll get nothing, James. Nothing at all. Detective Martinez and Officer Chen stared at the laptop as the recording ended. Well, Detective Martinez said finally, I think we need to have a conversation with Mr. Morrison. But James Morrison was already 3 steps ahead of us. By the time Detective Martinez called Hartwell Industries, his assistant informed them that Mr. Morrison had left for an emergency business trip to their Singapore office that morning. His flight had departed Portland at 6:47 a.m., less than 2 hours after the police warrant was issued for my arrest. Convenient timing, Officer Chen muttered, hanging up his phone. Singapore doesn't have an extradition treaty for financial crimes under $50 million. Detective Martinez was already pulling up Morrison's financial records on her computer. Ms. Hartwell, if Morrison has fled the country, that actually supports your version of events. But we still have a problem. Your sister Jessica has filed a sworn statement claiming she witnessed you manipulating your father. Without her cooperation, it's going to be difficult to prove Morrison orchestrated this conspiracy. My phone buzzed with a text from David, emergency. Jessica's at the office demanding access to Morrison's files. She knows something's wrong. Detective, I think Jessica is starting to realize she's been set up too, I said, showing her the message. What if we could get her to cooperate? That would certainly help. But Ms. Hartwell, your sister has publicly accused you of elder abuse. She's not likely to admit she was wrong, especially if it means admitting she was stealing from charity funds. I thought about Jessica's face when she'd screamed that the will was fake, about her genuine shock and pain. She might be entitled and cruel, but she truly believed she deserved Dad's inheritance because she'd stayed loyal to the family. Learning that Morrison had been manipulating her criminal activity to frame both of us might be the wake-up call she needed. What if she doesn't have to admit to the theft? I asked. What if we can prove Morrison was controlling her access to those accounts all along? Detective Martinez looked intrigued. Explain. I pulled up the financial records again, pointing to a pattern I'd noticed earlier. Look at the dates of Jessica's transactions. They don't just coincide with Morrison's electronic approvals, they coincide with days when Jessica was out of the office. Every single theft occurred when she was at client meetings, industry conferences, or taking vacation days. Officer Chen leaned closer to the screen. You're saying Morrison was using her access credentials when she wasn't around? I'm saying Morrison had complete control over Jessica's computer access and was making transfers using her login while she was documentably elsewhere. Just like he created fake journal entries claiming I had conversations with Dad when I was provably at work. Detective Martinez was already dialing another number. I'm calling the DA's office. If we can prove Morrison was using both your identities to commit crimes while you were both alibied elsewhere, we might be able to flip Jessica from suspect to victim. While she spoke with the prosecutor, my phone rang. Jessica's name appeared on the screen, and for the first time in years, I answered her call without dread. Morgan. Her voice was different, shaky, uncertain. I'm at Morrison's office and, something's very wrong here. His computers are wiped clean, his files are gone, and his secretary says he transferred $2 million to an offshore account this morning. Jessica, where are you exactly? His executive office. But Morgan, I found something hidden in his desk drawer. A flash drive with files labeled Hartwell Contingency Plan and journal documentation. I think we need to talk. 20 minutes later, Jessica walked into the police station carrying a small silver flash drive and looking more uncertain than I'd ever seen her. Gone was the polished, angry woman from the will reading. In her place stood someone who was beginning to understand just how thoroughly she'd been manipulated. I owe you an apology, she said quietly, not quite meeting my eyes. And I think James Morrison owes us both a lot more than that. The files on Morrison's flash drive painted a picture of manipulation so thorough it made my stomach turn. Jessica and I huddled around Detective Martinez's computer as she opened document after document revealing the scope of James's deception. Jesus Christ, Jessica whispered, staring at a spreadsheet titled, Phase 3, Mutual Destruction. The document outlined a timeline spanning 18 months, beginning with James's initial discovery that Dad was secretly funding homeless organizations. Detective Martinez clicked on a folder labeled, Psychological Profiles. Inside were detailed behavioral analyses of both Jessica and me, complete with strategies for exploiting our weaknesses. Under my name, guilt complex regarding father relationship. Will sacrifice self-interest to avoid family conflict. Weakness, cannot tolerate being seen as manipulative. Under Jessica's name, entitlement issues and desperate need for paternal approval. Will rationalize unethical behavior if it serves perceived family loyalty. Weakness, cannot admit to being outmaneuvered by subordinate. He's been studying us like lab rats, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Jessica's face had gone completely pale as she read further. Morgan, look at this. She pointed to a document dated 14 months ago, long before Dad's death. James was already planning to frame both of us. He knew exactly how to make us destroy each other. The file contained transcripts of conversations James had recorded without permission, including phone calls where Jessica complained about bleeding heart liberals and meetings where I'd expressed frustration about Dad's ruthless business practices. He'd taken our private venting and crafted it into ammunition. But the most damning evidence was in a folder labeled insurance policies. James had been systematically documenting Dad's declining health, his medication schedules, even his sleep patterns. One chilling entry from 6 months ago read, RH increasingly forgetful during evening hours. Memory issues create opportunity for narrative manipulation. Recommend scheduling crucial conversations after 8 p.m. when cognitive function demonstrably compromised. He was targeting Dad when his mind was foggy from medication, Detective Martinez said grimly. Classic elder abuse tactics. Jessica's hands were shaking as she opened another file. There's more. Look at this email thread between James and someone called K. Chen from February. The emails revealed that James had hired an actor to impersonate me during 2 crucial visits with Dad. Someone who looked enough like me to fool an elderly man with declining vision, especially during evening hours when Dad was tired and medicated. Asterisk K. Chen, second session completed successfully. Subject believes Morgan expressed concern about Jessica's callous attitude toward disadvantaged populations. Recommend maintaining 3-week intervals to establish pattern without raising suspicion. Asterisk. Asterisk Morrison, excellent. Ensure conversations occur during evening medication window, 7 to 9 p.m. Security system will be disabled during sessions. Documentation phase proceeds as planned. Asterisk. That's why the journal entries were disprovable, I realized. James needed me to have alibis during the fake visits so he could later claim I was lying about the conversations. He was setting up a trap within a trap. Jessica stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. Morgan, I need to tell you something. 3 weeks ago, James offered me a deal. He said if I supported his promotion to CEO after Dad's death, he'd help me contest any will changes in your favor. He claimed he had evidence you'd been manipulating Dad, and he promised to share it if I needed ammunition for a legal challenge. Detective Martinez looked up sharply. He was recruiting you as his ally before your father even died. I thought he was trying to protect the company's stability, Jessica said miserably. But now I realize he was positioning me to be his puppet CEO while he maintained real control through blackmail and manipulation. My phone buzzed with a call from Mr. Brennan. Detective Martinez nodded for me to answer. Ms. Hartwell, we have a serious problem. His voice was tight with urgency. James Morrison didn't just flee to Singapore. Before he left, he transferred voting control of Hartwell Industries to a shell company incorporated in the Cayman Islands. As of this morning, he effectively owns 41% of your father's business through a series of proxy agreements he'd been secretly establishing for months. How is that possible? Your father's shares were held in a corporate trust that Morrison administered as CFO. The trust documents gave him emergency powers to protect company assets during periods of ownership uncertainty, language he apparently drafted himself 3 years ago. He's claiming the will contest creates exactly that uncertainty. Jessica had gone completely white. He's stealing the entire company. Not stealing, Mr. Brennan corrected grimly. According to the legal documents he filed in the Cayman Islands this morning, he's protecting shareholder interests until the estate dispute is resolved. And given that he's now beyond U.S. jurisdiction, there's very little we can do to stop him. The reality hit me like a physical blow. While Jessica and I had been busy destroying each other, James Morrison had been positioning himself to steal everything Dad had built, not just the inheritance, but the entire $47 million empire. Detective Martinez was already on her phone with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division when Jessica grabbed my arm. Morgan, there's something else, she whispered urgently. Last month, James asked me to sign what he called routine succession planning documents. I didn't read them carefully because he said they were just contingency plans in case Dad became incapacitated. My blood ran cold. What kind of documents? Power of attorney forms, emergency business continuity agreements, something about temporary management structures. She trailed off as the implications hit her. Oh my God. I gave him legal authority to make those transfers, didn't I? Before I could respond, Detective Martinez ended her call with grim news. The FBI can freeze Morrison's domestic assets, but the Cayman Islands incorporation happened months ago. He's been planning this theft far longer than we realized. Officer Chen looked up from Morrison's flash drive, his expression dark. Detective, you need to see this. There's a folder labeled Timeline Final Phase, with entries from as recent as yesterday morning. The document was chilling in its clinical precision. Asterisk Tuesday 6:30 a.m., Jessica removes documents from RH residence as anticipated. Emotional state, angry, desperate, perfect for manipulation, asterisk. Asterisk Tuesday 11:15 p.m., Jay arrives at office building. Present fake journal evidence while accessing security systems to delete actual visitor footage from February/March, asterisk. Asterisk Wednesday 2:30 a.m., complete financial transfers to Meridian Holdings, Cayman. Jay's power of attorney signatures provide legal cover for emergency asset protection, asterisk. Asterisk Wednesday 6 a.m., file police complaint using Jay as complainant. M will be arrested by 8 a.m., removing final obstacle to board control, asterisk. Asterisk Wednesday 9:45 a.m., depart for Singapore. Estimated timeline for complete company acquisition, 72 hours, asterisk. Jessica sank into a chair, her face ashen. He used me to steal my own inheritance. Every signature I gave him, every document I signed, I was helping him rob us both. There's more, Officer Chen continued. Morrison kept detailed psychological manipulation logs. Listen to this entry from March 20th. Jay responds predictably to perceived threats against family loyalty. Recommendation: frame inheritance loss as personal betrayal by M rather than business decision by RH. Subject will focus anger on sister rather than investigating actual cause of disinheritance. Detective Martinez stood up, her expression grim with determination. We're dealing with one of the most sophisticated financial fraud schemes I've ever seen. Morrison spent years positioning himself to steal a $47 million company by manipulating two grieving daughters into destroying each other. My phone rang again. This time it was David. Morgan, you need to get to the office immediately. The board just called an emergency meeting, and they're voting on whether to accept Morrison's temporary management proposal from the Cayman Islands company. When's the vote? In 2 hours. But here's the thing, Morrison's shell company is claiming they have 41% voting control, which would normally be enough to block any major decisions. Except. He paused. Jessica still holds her original 5% stake that Dad gave her when she joined the company. If both of you showed up together and voted against Morrison's takeover, you'd have majority control. Jessica looked up sharply. My 5% plus Morgan's inheritance would be 54%. We could stop him. Detective Martinez was already grabbing her keys. Ms. Hartwell, both of you, we're going to Hartwell Industries right now. Officer Chen, get the FBI on a conference call with the Cayman Islands Financial Authority. If we can prove Morrison used fraudulent signatures to establish that shell company, we might be able to freeze everything before he consolidates control. As we rushed toward the police cars, Jessica caught my arm again. Morgan, when this is over, when we stop James, what happens between us? I said horrible things about you. I accused you of crimes you didn't commit. I looked at my sister, really looked at her for the first time in years. Beneath the designer clothes and perfect makeup was someone who'd been manipulated just as thoroughly as I had, someone who genuinely believed she was protecting our father's legacy. We figure out how to be sisters again, I said. But first, we save Dad's company. The irony wasn't lost on me that after 5 years of estrangement and 2 days of bitter warfare, Jessica and I were finally united, racing against time to stop the man who'd orchestrated our entire family's destruction. The Hartwell Industries boardroom had never felt more like a battlefield. Jessica and I sat side by side for the first time in 5 years, facing 7 grim-faced board members who held the company's future in their hands. Detective Martinez and 2 FBI agents flanked the conference table, their laptops open to financial crime databases. Board Chairman William Hayes cleared his throat nervously. Before we proceed with the vote on Meridian Holdings' management proposal, I understand there have been developments regarding Mr. Morrison's departure. Developments is putting it mildly, FBI agent Sarah Kim said, sliding a thick folder across the mahogany table. James Morrison has been arrested by Interpol at Singapore's Changi Airport on charges of international wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. The collective gasp from the board members was audible. Mrs. Chen, Dad's oldest business partner, leaned forward with wide eyes. Arrested? But James filed all the proper paperwork for the emergency management transition. Using forged signatures and falsified power of attorney documents, Agent Kim interrupted. The Cayman Islands Financial Authority froze Meridian Holdings' account 6 hours ago when we proved the shell company was established using fraudulent documentation. Jessica's voice was steady but strained as she addressed the board. I need to make a formal statement. I unknowingly signed documents that James Morrison used to facilitate his theft of company assets. I was manipulated into believing my sister had committed elder abuse, when in fact Morrison had been systematically deceiving our father for months. She turned to look at me directly. Morgan never lied to Dad about me. Someone else did, someone who wanted us both destroyed so he could steal everything our father built. Board member David Patterson shuffled through the FBI documents. The evidence here is overwhelming. Morrison created fake journal entries, hired actors to impersonate family members, even manipulated both daughters' work schedules to create false alibis. This is beyond corporate malfeasance, this is criminal conspiracy. Agent Kim nodded grimly. Morrison's own files contained a detailed psychological profile of both women, outlining exactly how to manipulate them into mutual destruction. He spent 18 months planning this theft. Chairman Hayes looked between Jessica and me. The question now is corporate governance. With Morrison's proxy agreements invalidated, voting control returns to the estate. Ms. Morgan Hartwell, as primary beneficiary, you now hold controlling interest in Hartwell Industries. The weight of that statement settled over the room. $47 million in assets, 800 employees, a company that had defined my family for 3 generations, all of it now rested in my hands. But as I looked at Jessica, seeing the exhaustion and genuine remorse in her eyes, I realized Dad's real gift hadn't been the money. It had been the chance to choose who I wanted to be. I'd like to propose a different structure, I said, my voice gaining strength. Jessica will remain as Chief Operating Officer, overseeing day-to-day operations. I'll serve as CEO, but with one condition, 50% of annual profits will fund a new Hartwell Foundation focused on affordable housing and homeless services. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. Morgan, you don't have to. Yes, I do, I said firmly. Dad left me everything because he wanted me to fix what was broken in this family. The money was never the point, it was about choosing compassion over greed, family over revenge. Chairman Hayes smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen in that boardroom in years. All in favor of the proposed management structure. 7 hands raised unanimously. Outside the boardroom windows, Portland's skyline stretched toward the horizon Dad had helped shape. James Morrison was in federal custody, facing decades in prison. The company was safe, the family was healing, and for the first time since Dad's death, I felt like I could breathe. Jessica squeezed my hand as we signed the new corporate documents. Thank you for saving us both, she whispered. That's what sisters do, I replied, finally understanding what Dad had really left me, not just an inheritance, but a chance at redemption for all of us.